Nobody's talking about the Square Enix RPG, and they should be. You play as Elliot, an adventurer exploring a vast continent called Pilavilda, overrun by beast tribes, hidden caves, ancient ruins, and 4 full ages to explore. Elliot wields 7 different weapon types: sword, chains, sickles, each one customizable through a magicite to tailor your combat style. And your companion, Faye, a fairy who rides alongside you. Her powerful magic works both in and out of battles, striking enemies, retrieving items from places Elliot cannot reach, and she is not just a companion, she is a mechanic. This is the adventure of Elliot, the Millennium Tales. So, which one are you meaning first?